Whisper in the night dark, footsteps in the backyard, shadows dance on stained walls, blood rust every nightfall. Fear grips like chains tight, chasing you in moonlight. Eyes gleam with twisted clay, no escape from me.
What up, home slices, home fries, and homes of other varieties? If you're new, welcome. I'm Emily, the fine art medium. I'm a psychic medium who specializes in the paranormal, and I have a degree in social deviance. If you've been here before, welcome back. So, today's video, we are going to be reacting to the Blue Moon Ritual Triple Murders. And if you haven't heard of them, well, welcome to the club, because I didn't know about them either. So we're going to talk about the case, give the background. I will put sources down below as usual, and break it down psychically and psychologically if we can. So, without further ado, let's rock and roll. So first source is from Oxygen here. And here we go. July 31st, 2015, the Pensacola Sheriff's Office made a welfare check at the home of Richard Smith, a 49-year-old IT specialist for the Department of Homeland Security. His boss had reached out to officials when Richard failed to come in to work for 3 days. No one answered the door of the home. Richard shared with his mother, Von Seal, 77, who was widowed and retired, and his brother, John Smith, 47, who worked at Walmart. Police contacted Richard's half-brother, Donald Wayne Hartung, who gave them permission to enter the house. Inside, authorities found Von Seal, Richard, and John dead. Each one was buried separately under a mountain of clothing and blankets. Once the medical examiner investigators arrived on the scene, we pulled the blankets off, and you could tell that they had been there for at least a couple of days, said Wainwright, an investigator with the state attorney's office. John and Von Seal both had injuries to their heads and gashes in their necks. She also had defensive cuts on her hands, and part of her pinky finger was missing. Richard had been beaten, stabbed, and shot in the right ear. A bloody hammer and paper towels, as well as cigarette butts, were collected at the scene. Hartung was transported to the sheriff's office, where Escambia County Homicide Detective Matt Infinger hoped he could shed light on the brutal triple homicide. Hartung, Von Seal's son from a previous marriage, said he last saw his mother and John 3 days earlier when he cooked dinner for them at their house. He was their caretaker. Von Seal had trouble walking, and John had special needs. He'd left a plate of food in the oven for Richard, he said. Donald agreed to give us a DNA sample, said Infinger, adding that he had no criminal record and was being cooperative. We had no reason not to believe him. He was not a suspect. Because the bodies were covered, the medical examiner couldn't pinpoint when the murders happened. It was estimated that the family was killed at least 2 days before their discovery. An internet search turned up the idea that during cult or ritualistic slayings, blankets and clothes are heaped on bodies to warm them. A blue moon used by pagan and Wiccan followers to guide rituals occurred around the time of the murders, which added heft to this theory. There was some speculation that maybe the bodies were to be kept warm until the actual blue moon occurred, which would have been in a few days, said Wright. At a press conference outlining the crime, a sheriff stated that the method of the murder positions of bodies led us to believe that there's a potential that was a ritualistic killing. The leader of the local Wiccan group, however, said the victims were not associated with any of the area's pagan or Wiccan organizations. But at the press conference, the murders were called the Blue Moon Killings. Suddenly, this was making headlines not just in Pensacola, Florida, but throughout the world. Investigators dug deeper into the background of the Smiths, who, sources said, stuck to themselves. Detectives considered the possibility that Richard's hush-hush work with Homeland Security could be tied to the crime, but a thorough investigation cleared this as a line of investigation. We conducted another interview with Donald Hartung, and during the interviews with Donald, I learned that he practiced Wicca, said Infinger. This was a red flag. Police obtained a warrant to search Hartung's home. They found a prayer room and some books about witchcraft, but no weapons or anything connected to the triple murder. Just because somebody has an alternative belief system doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing anything wrong, said Wright. But Hartung remained a suspect, and investigators explored his background. A co-worker told them that Hartung bragged of his family's wealth and that he stood to inherit that fortune. An interview with a relative of the Smith family suggested that Hartung, who'd been portrayed as a caretaker, had another side. He was mean, said Faye Hawes, Hartung's cousin. If he saw a weakness in you as a child or something, it would pick on that weakness. People also said he was jealous of Richard's success and had regularly sought financial help from his mother. Investigators found that Von Seals Smith's estate was worth close to $1 million. Although Hartung had been excluded from the will, he would be the sole heir if his half-brothers were deceased. Investigators interviewed the Smiths' neighbors to check Hartung's account about his comings and goings before the bodies were found. Neighbors recalled seeing his car there later than that, and added that when he drove away, he kept his headlights off. Detectives hoped that DNA evidence collected from the crime scene could move their case forward. Hartung's DNA was found on cigarette butts mixed in with paper towels covered in Von Seals' blood. On October 27, 2015, Hartung was arrested by the Escambia County Sheriff's Department on 3 counts of first-degree murder. Evidence against Hartung was mostly circumstantial, though, but as the trial approached, investigators received a letter from a jailhouse informant. Hartung had talked to the cellmate because he had expressed interest in the Wiccan religion, investigators said. The informant claimed that Hartung told him he piled blankets and clothes on top of his family to make it harder to determine when they died. The informant also volunteered shocking information about Von Seals' missing fingertip. Donald told him he had to torture his mother to get the combination of the safe in the home, said Infinger. We never even found it during the crime scene investigation. Investigators concluded the murders weren't part of a ritual, but were motivated by money. Hartung had been written out of his mother's will and believed he would never get the money, nearly $900,000, unless his family members died, prosecutors said. During Hartung's trial, the cellmate testified to the gruesome way he killed his family, beating them with a claw hammer, torturing his mother, slitting their throats, all while after making dinner for them, said Barrows. Hartung, 63, was found guilty of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison in February 2020 without the chance of parole. He is currently serving his sentence at the Graceville Correctional Facility in Jackson County, Florida. Shortly after the state rested its case, Monday afternoon, Hartung's defense attorney, Michael Griffith, called on an expert witness to address his client's practice of the Wicca religion and what, if any, part that may have played in the deaths. During an interview of my client by law enforcement, it has been alleged that because my client practiced Wicca, he would have participated in a sacrifice of the deceased, Griffith said in court on that Monday. He then asked the witness, Paul Larson, a professor emeritus at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, is there anything such as sacrificing, such as animals or people, in the Wicca religion? No, there is not, replied Larson, who is also an ordained minister in the Circle Sanctuary, which he said is one of the nation's oldest Wiccan churches. He then explained that modern-day Wiccans practice neither animal nor human sacrifices. It was also suggested in the interview with the client that he murdered his family as a blue moon ritual, Griffith said. Can you tell me if there are any blue moon rituals or a history of sacrifice on the blue moon? We do honor the cycles of the blue moon, Larson replied. So it is common for rituals to be performed on the full or the new moon, but they are not the major rituals of the religion. Larson said the Wiccan religion is an earth-based spirituality that is similarly to Druidry, ceremonial magic, and modern shamanism that all take nature as being divine. It is part of what I call a very broad religion group, better known as paganism, Larson said, or some prefer the term heathen. Unlike Christians who believe that God or the divine created nature, Wiccans believe that nature is the divine or God, Larson said. Responding to a question about whether the Smiths' bodies were placed in a ritualistic fashion, Larson said, if you were to use a sacrificial victim for a religious purpose, you would want them to be displayed in some way that is surrounded by other ritualistic elements, incense, holders, candles, pentagrams, or other sorts of things like that. And there was none of that at the Smith household. So then they did interview the son of Donald Wayne Hartung. Hartung Jr.'s vulnerable testimony reveals why Hartung Sr. was considered a black sheep in the family. The prosecution started their questioning by asking Hartung Jr. if he knew his father was the killer. I didn't question it at all, Hartung Jr. said. Hartung Jr. says his father told him the news of his grandmother and uncle's deaths over the phone. He said, son, they're all dead, Hartung Jr. testified. I said, that's kind of weird. What are you talking about? He said, they're all dead. That's how I found out. Hartung Jr. told the court his father's relationship with his family had been strained for years. It seemed like he was the black sheep of the group, Hartung Jr. said. He was always separated from the rest of them. This separation was made worse after Hartung's half-brother, John Smith, exposed himself to him as a child, says Hartung Jr. I don't know what happened behind closed doors, but I know they didn't talk for a good period of time, Hartung Jr. said. A jailhouse informant also testified on Friday. He told the court that Hartung Sr. was angry with his mother for not believing that John Smith molested his child. Chilling testimony from the informant corroborates the prosecution's case that the murder was motivated by money. He, Donald Hartung, said he killed them, the informant said. Hartung said he killed them, the informant said. He said he wanted the money because she, Hartung's mother, left him out of the will. According to the informant, Hartung planned the murder over several years. He says Hartung killed his family after they finished eating dinner after their weekly get-together. The informant testified that Hartung killed his brother John by hitting him in the head with a hammer and slitting his throat. He says Hartung shot his other brother Richard with a gun because he was a heavier man. The informant also told the court Hartung tortured his mother before slitting her throat to get the combination to the safe. According to the informant, Hartung had 3 stories to explain why his family members could have been murdered by someone else. John was accused of exposing himself to a child at Walmart. Richard was involved with a married woman, and the murders could have been tied to Richard's job with Homeland Security. Oh, well, so there's a lot to unpack here, a lot of information. However, through the research that I did do, I didn't find much information about like a psych evaluation or anything like that. And there's not much information on his background, really. I mean, there was a decent amount, but to give like a full psychological analysis might be a little difficult. But I did channel and I did get some things. And so we want to know like whether or not Wicca or witchcraft or the occult that he was attracted to might have opened some doors to create some attachments, or perhaps bring in attachments that might have brought on the murder. Or murders, technically, because there were 3. So, dude, when I channeled, I felt a lot of animosity with that guy. Holy macaroni. There's so much animosity between him, his parents, the one that was alive, as of recent, technically the mother, and between the brothers. It also feels like the brothers received things and were treated differently than Donald. And it's like he kept score of every instance this occurred, so he felt like his family owed him for all those times. And this would have really pissed him off to the fact that Von Seal kept him out of the will, even though he was taking care of them, taking care of the mother and his half-brother. So that kind of just added insult to injury. And again, he was keeping score of what he's done for them and all the things that they've given to other people and not him. Growing up, I suspect Donald faced trauma, abuse, and or neglect. And mind you guys, I did this channel before I even went into the research, because I like to keep it fresh and without anything that can affect my channel results. So yeah, I had suspected that Donald had faced trauma, abuse, and or neglect, whether it was legit or perceived in that way, whereas his siblings may not have either as much or at all, which only adds to the animosity and jealousy. Deep-seated hatred if he was able to do those things to his family members, which causes me to believe Donald Wayne Hartung really did suffer from the FUBAR trauma. This type of hatred doesn't just appear for no reason. If you're gonna go all the way to torture your mother, yeah, some fucked up shit happened. And then you can add the fact that his half-brother allegedly did some inappropriate things to his child. Again, that will add some animosity, hatred, and negative feelings. Obviously, that's still not a good excuse to murder his family members, but definitely a concrete reason or motive other than money. There is some significance that has to do with Christmas or around that time, because a Christmas song did pop into my head. I'm trying to remember which song it was. Now I friggin' forget. Now it's gonna drive me crazy. It's fine, because you know what? I hate Christmas music and I'd rather not have a song stuck in my head. Okay, moving on. I did see a close-up vision of a dog's face, like part of its eye and its snout, and then it turned into the same part of the body but on an alligator. I don't know what that has to do with anything. I did see a female earthy though, and this skeletal thought form entity consuming all of the negative energy like a black hole though. So it opened its mouth and it was just sucking the black negative energy, and its eyes were like black holes, its mouth was like a black hole. It was freaky deaky. Never seen anything like that before. But yes, I did draw it, and this time this thing took up 2 pages. So, the sun will come out tomorrow. Don't know why that song just popped into my head, but it did. So there you have that. Donald, I suspect, felt sick to his stomach when he found out that his mother put his half-brothers in the will and excluded him, especially after what happened to his child. He probably wanted to murder right then and there, but you know what? He kept it to himself, those feelings, and waited until he let loose. I'm sure it sent him into a downward spiral of hatred and anger and betrayal and guilt. Yeah, to the point where he was so hateful and angry that he spent several years plotting the deaths of his half brothers and his mother. OMG. He felt like they didn't deserve anything, while the money was a good chunk of the motive. Feeling betrayed and hurt was another chunk. He also felt like he did so much for them and saw this as a way of them not caring or respecting his efforts. And strangely, I saw the Ace of Swords in reverse. I didn't even pull cards, but I saw the card anyway, which has more likely to do with making rash decisions. Although it's weird because they said he planned this murder out over several years. It's probably why he was mean. Now, there are thousands upon thousands of cases where you have a family member that does something foobar to another family member, especially in the category of SA and abuse, and that family member or the parents of the family member that's the victim says something to other family members, and then it escalates to drama, and then people are not believed, and the perp goes unpunished, and the victim gets blamed, and all this shit. And yeah, it's not surprising, and I'm sure that was going on. And I feel like too, like with the treatment of how the mother treated the half brothers and how she treated Donald Wayne Hartung, definitely added to the problem. And if the one is special needs, I forget which one's already special needs. I'm not sure if it's John or the other one, but if the special needs one was the one that did inappropriate things to the child, it gets really dicey because they're special needs and they might not be fully aware or competent enough to understand what they did was wrong. So there's a lot of problems even in that area. And also, even if that wasn't part of the problem and the half brother that did do that wasn't special needs, I still feel like the mother would be in denial because it's her child and she probably couldn't see her own child doing such a thing. And yeah, it just causes a lot of problems. Honestly, if it were me, I would have just said bye and not stick around. But the only reason he did stick around was he was hoping to get the money from the will. Honestly, that's the only reason he stuck around. And he sat there and was patient. And he thought, you know what? At the end of the day, when they go bye-bye and die, I'll just get their money. That'd be great. But then he found out that he wasn't in the will. And then his plans went to shambles. So then he had to change his plans to murder. So, yeah. That's like earth sign shit. Like, anyway. Yeah, I understand, but that's not saying I agree. And then I drew the Earthbound. That's a female. She's got dark hair that's in an inside out ponytail. So, you know, when you put your hair in a ponytail and then you flip it in and then it looks like, I don't know, it's tucked. Well, that's the hairstyle of this person. She's wearing a sky blue dress from the late 1800s, early 1900s. She likes Donald because he's got similar traumas to her. And I honestly don't think the attachments that he has is what caused the murders. I think what caused the murders were his traumas and deep-seated hatred. So he did that all by himself. But here is the female earthy that I drew. There we go. So yeah. Again, for the psychology part, I don't have too much information to give a good educated guess. So I don't really want to talk about that. But I might throw out some potentials. So if he allegedly suffered any kind of abuse during childhood with either his stepdad or his biological dad, that could obviously do some damage. Again, we don't have that information, so I can only say alleged, or if it did happen, it would result into X. But if anything, he might have some depression, especially if he has any type of guilt towards what happened to his child. And depression in terms of how parents treated him versus his half-brothers. But other than that, I can't really go into a full analysis because I don't have enough information. Yeah, he was mean because duh. And he was very patient. And yeah, I can't give too much information on that. So I'm going to actually end the video here. And guys, if you have any thoughts, questions, concerns, please leave them down below. I'm always curious to see what you have to say. If you're someone who practices Wicca, leave a comment down below. Let me know. I'm always curious to see what my subscribers do in their free time or the different types of practices they do. So yeah, again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again tomorrow, though I might be switching it up soon, so we shall see.